we felt so privileged. And then just like that, we are 24 years into 2000. Who would have known how time flies? So that's why it is good for us to enjoy the minute, enjoy ourselves as we go. So talking about how time flies, we'll be starting a new book today. The book we'll be reading is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, a classic. This book was first published in 1959, like 1959, a long time ago. It will be, I'm sure, hearing about the book, hearing me read it is going to bring so much nostalgia to our older folks. Me, I wasn't born then. We have people who were born then who will remember the book. Reading for pleasure for this period, we'll be taking Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Like I said, it was first published in 1959, and it was one of the first African novels written in English to receive global acclaim. Wow. So we're going to start from chapter 1, the first paragraph. Reading for pleasure. So, Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Amalinze, the cat. Amalinze was the great wrestler who for 7 years was undefeated. From Umuofia to Mbaino, he was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight which the old man agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. The drums beat and the flute sang and the spectators held their breath. Amalinze was a wily craftsman, but Okonkwo was as slippery as a fish in water. Every nerve and every muscle stood out on his arm as their backs and their thighs and one almost had them stretching to breaking point. In the end, Okonkwo threw the cat. That was many years ago, 20 years or more. And during this time, Okonkwo's fame had grown like a bushfire in the Harmattan. He was tall and huge, and his husky eyebrows and wide nose gave him a very severe look. He breathed heavily, and it was said that when he slept, his wives and children in their houses could hear him breathe. When he walked, his heels hardly touched the ground, and he seemed to walk on springs as if he was going to pounce on anybody. And he did pounce on people quite often. He had a slight stammer, and whenever he was angry and could not get his words out quickly enough, he would use his fist. He had no patience with unsuccessful men. He had no patience with his father. Unoka, for that was his father's name, had died 10 years ago. In his day, he was lazy and improvident and was quite incapable of thinking about tomorrow. If any money came his way, and it seldom did, he immediately bought gourds of palm wine, called round the neighbors, and made merry. He always said that whenever he saw a dead man's mouth, he saw the folly of not eating what one had in one's lifetime. Unoka was, of course, a debtor, and he owed every neighbor some money, from a few cowries to quite substantial amounts. He was tall and very thin and had a slight stoop. He wore a haggard and mournful look, except when he was drinking or playing on his flute. He was very good at his flute, and his happiest moments were the 2 or 3 moons after the harvest, when the village musicians brought down their instruments hung above the fireplace. Unoka would play with them, his face beaming with blessedness and peace. Sometimes another village would ask Umuoka's hand and their dancing egugu to come and stay with them and teach them their tunes. They would go to such hosts for as long as 3 or 4 markets, making music and feasting. Umuoka loved the good life and the good fellowship, and he loved this season of the year when the rains had stopped and the sun rose every morning with dazzling beauty. And it was not too hot either, because the cold and the dry Harmattan wind was blowing down from the north. Some years the Harmattan was very severe, and dense haze hung on the atmosphere. Old men and children would then sit around log fires, warming their bodies. Unoka loved it all, and he loved the first kite that returned with the dry season, and the children who sang songs of welcome to them. He would remember his own childhood, how he had often wandered around looking for kites sailing leisurely against the blue sky. As soon as he found one, he would sing. He would sing while being welcomed back from the long journey and asking if it had brought home any length of cloth. That was years ago when he was young. Unoka, the grown-up, was a failure. He was poor, and his wife and children had hardly enough to eat. People laughed at him because he was a kufa, and they swore never to lend him any more money because he never paid back. But Unoka was such a man that he always succeeded in borrowing more and piling up his debts. One day, a neighbor called Okoye came to see him. He was reclining on a mud bed in his hut playing on the flute. He immediately rose and shook hands with Okoye, who then unrolled the goat skin which he carried under his arm and sat down. Umoka went into an inner room and soon returned with a small wooden dice containing a kola nut, some alligator pepper, and a lump of white chalk. "I have cola," he announced when he sat down and passed the disc over to the guest. "Thank you. He who brings cola brings life. But I think you ought to break it," replied Okoye, passing back the disc. "No, it is for you, I think." And they agreed, and they argued like this for a few moments before Unoka accepted the honor of breaking the cola. Okoye, meanwhile, took the lump of chalk, drew some lines on the floor, and then painted his big toe. As he broke the cola, Umoka prayed to their ancestors for life and health, for protection against his enemies. When they had eaten, they talked about many things, about the heavy rains which were drowning the yams, about the next ancestral feast, and about the impending war with the village of Mbaino. Umoka was very happy when it came to war. He was in fact a coward and would not bear the sight of blood. So he changed the subject and talked about music. His face beamed. He could hear in his mind's ear the blood-stirring and intricate rhythm of the ekwe and the udu and the ogene, and he would hear his own flute weaving in and out of them, decorating them with a colorful and plaintive tune. The total effect was gay and brisk, but if one picked out the flute as it went up and down and then broke into the soft snatches, one saw that there was sorrow and grief there. Okoye was a mistake. He played on the ogene, but he was not a failure like Unoka. He had a large band full of yams, and he had 3 wives. And now he was going to take Ndimili title, the 3rd highest in the land. It was a very expensive ceremony, and he was gathering all his resources together. That was in fact the reason why he had come to see Unoka. He cleared his throat and began. "Thank you for the cola. You may have heard of the title I intend to take shortly. Having spoken plainly so far, Okoye said the next half dozen sentences in Proverbs. Among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and Proverbs, the palm oil with which words are eaten. Okoye was a great talker, and he spoke for a long time, skirting round the subject and then hitting it finally. In short, he was asking Umoka to return the 200 cowries he had borrowed from him more than 2 years ago. As soon as Umoka understood what his friend was driving at, he burst out laughing. He laughed loud and long, and his voice rang out clear on the Ogene, and tears stood in his eyes. His visitor was amazed and sat speechless. At the end, Umoka was able to give an answer between fresh outbursts of mirth. So this is how much we can take on today's program, Reading for Pleasure, on your darling station, Ekiti FM 91.5. So thank you very much for staying tuned. So I invite you to join us again, same time, same station next week. Do have a splendid night's rest. Bye-bye.